No, I'm gonna.
All right. We'd like to welcome everyone to our school board meeting tonight. And if you could stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great, thank you, Misty. Thank you very much. We would like to first do an approval of the agenda.
Move approval. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Aye. None opposed? And I assume there are no emergency additions or modifications?
There is none.
Great. It's time for public comments. Not having any, we'll move to our... Did we already approve the minutes for our last meeting?
No, that's going to be
At the next meeting.
Regular meeting.
Okay.
Regular meeting.
But this is a special meeting, so we'll be doing that next time. Moving on to our special presentation of the LCAP, the Local Control Accountability Program. Marilyn, welcome, and thank you for your great work.
Oh, you're welcome. I have to say, I know sometimes I feel like I'm the face of the LCAP, but really I have to acknowledge that there are a lot of people who do a lot of things to make the LCAP possible. Stakeholders, including teachers, employee groups, administrators, parents, students. So a lot of people give input, and I think that that's really important for the board to know. That it's not my document, it's not Hank's document, but it's really our document as a district. So I have to acknowledge that. A couple of things I want to mention about the LCAP and really about the LCAP process. Really three things. I think one significant thing that we learned through this LCAP process, because it was our second year of doing it, is that we realized that by doing it, it really improved communication among all stakeholders, parents, teachers, admin, employee groups, all stakeholders. So that was one significant thing that I think is accomplished when we're writing the LCAP. One important thing we learned through the LCAP process is that parents and stakeholders want transparency, and local measures. The one measure we have, that 8th priority local measure, student wellness, is really important and meaningful to stakeholders. That was one thing that really came out in our stakeholder meetings. And also stakeholders, I think, one important thing that we learned, stakeholders really appreciate that formal opportunity to give input. So that was one important thing that we learned. I think one thing that we will, I kind of was thinking, what's something we might repeat or might change? We had regional stakeholder meetings this year. One on the west side that we held at Miners Oaks, and included Nordhoff, Miners Oaks, and Miramont parents. And then we had one on the east side, which was held at Topatopa, included some at San Antonio, Topa, and Matoha parents. And I think that that was really a good way for stakeholders to come together, give input, and feel welcomed in a more familiar environment. So I think we'll repeat that again next year and have the 2 regional stakeholder meetings. So,
well, thank you for your introduction. We're required to hold a public hearing.
Yes.
So if we can have a motion to open the public hearing.
Move that we open the public hearing.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Great. Now it's time for us to ask questions or comments.
yeah, are there questions about any parts of the LCAP or the process, or?
I have a couple of questions. One, I'm really excited. I'm really happy to see the renewed emphasis on foster children and foster family, help interventions and help with that. I know as a former foster parent, kids really feel at a loss because they feel like they're being punished for the the things that their parents have done. And
Exactly.
so they really need a lot of help, and I think this is great. So.
Absolutely, and we have a very small number, .004. I mean, I don't remember how many, it might be 4 or something like that, but it's a really important step.
So important. And then I kept saying making sure that students are unduplicated. Is there an audit for that, or how do we know that students are not being duplicated in the various groups and subgroups? How is that controlled?
I can't answer.
That actually, it comes through a couple of sources, actually through Laura's office, through Tom McNamara. We have all kinds of categories of students, and just have to be sure that EL is in one group and low income is another group.
And that
They're not
in
duplicated.
two groups.
And of course,
They could be
we
in two
know
groups.
we know in our case it's good to know where they are, but we also know that we don't meet the requirement of 55%. So we do get funding within the other category, the normal category of funding, but we'll never reach the unduplicated percentage we need to reach.
It's a good question, though, because if we're not duplicating, how do we decide which?
I don't know. Laura, you deal with that.
The unduplicated count just means that we're not counting the EL and the free and reduced twice.
2 times.
So it's just an unduplicated.
Now we know
Follow the question.
we have all kinds of information actually every month from Suzanne Lubitoff on free and reduced lunch. So we know where that is. We know also, remember at one point we were pushing, trying to get to 55%. We got to about 53, and then the state changed the guidelines, and we slipped back to 43. Right?
Right.
So then our percentage for the budget became, I think it was the average of the two.
It's a rolling average. So right now we're at 47%.
We also know
You get a
that
little benefit of the first year.
our EL percentage is about 14.
EL actually, as of June 10th, is 9.
Oh, that 100%, okay. It's always been a 10 or a little higher or lower depending. So, the great majority of our students who qualify for special funding, if we ever were to get to that special funding point, would be in free and reduced lunch. We have a number of students, obviously, for whom English is a challenge, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are in EL population.
That's correct. That's correct.
Well, a lot of these things are actually for all students.
Sure.
That's right.
So
That's right.
I was, do you have other?
That was my main thing, and I just wanted to commend you on the detail and.
Oh, thank you.
I know you really slaved over this.
But it wasn't all, it wasn't
No, I
all my
understand.
doing.
You had to do the final checking and
Yeah.
everything, so.
Is my memory wrong about this, or is that last column that actually shows the amount, is that new? When you, on budget expenditures?
No, that was in last year's LCAP also.
I don't remember it, and it was so helpful this time. It was really interesting to see where that was going and how it was,
And
you could sort of,
what category?
if you know something about it, you could say, oh, that's how that's helping that point. So that was helpful also. I was wondering if, I went to something down in Camarillo where they were talking about this, and one of the speakers said, don't try to do something new every year. You've got to make your plans and then give yourself those 3 years to accomplish those things and to start bringing those numbers up. So I'm hoping maybe in the future we can kind of sort of highlight what's specifically new or specifically like popped up, so that we're not reading the entire draft.
I see.
I'm going, did I read that already today?
You don't
or
have to
did
try to find it.
Did I read it last time? Yeah. I don't, but it actually was kind of good to read it again, because I think I don't know the last time I read it whether I was actually a board member or not.
Probably not.
Yeah, so that was helpful, but I thought, well, are we going to do this every year? And you'll want to start remembering where the changes are.
A couple of things that are new. We're providing an English language learner summer school this summer. That's new. Obviously, the things about facilities and improved infrastructure for technology, those things are new from the 14-15.
One other thing that actually I was sent to the board this Friday was I was waiting for sort of a final explanation from Javier. But when you and I were talking about the new things, right? One was the summer school, the other was the enhanced mathematics program for incoming seventh graders, right?
That's right, that's right. Javier just invited all sixth grade students around May to attend summer school at Matilaha, just to give them a little boost when they get to seventh grade in the fall. I don't know how many.
Well,
are
you won't be
involved.
surprised to know that this was a combined thought of Javier and Yolanda Flores. Okay, and so the focus of the program is in fact on students, Spanish-speaking students, again, for whom the language has been a bit of a challenge, and some, particularly with Common Core, that in mathematics, we're just going to try to create an environment where they feel that bridge has been built between sixth grade and seventh grade. I don't know how many yet. That's what I'm waiting to find out.
Yeah,
So I think I'll know that by Thursday.
Okay. I don't know, some of the students might not be classified as English learner. Maybe they've been reclassified, but they have Spanish-speaking parents. And for them, both the parents and the student, academic language, which is really necessary for success in Common Core, is essential, and I think will be front-loaded during summer school. Right.
I do remember hearing from the teachers that I think it was somewhere around fourth grade that they said, we're really not learning to read anymore. We're reading to learn. And if you're struggling and you're behind in your reading grade level, that's really going to affect everything, your science and your social studies. That's rough.
For sure.
Were there any other questions or comments?
I just wanted also to commend you on the level of detail. I kind of look at the environmental things, and so I kind of went to the positive impact and the bully prevention program. And I like that last column because it shows me how little you actually have to work with. And I know how much positive impact is doing because I've heard those reports. For $1,000, it just blows my mind. And the same thing with the OUSD?
OUSD anti-bullying
All right.
program.
I wasn't trying to pronounce that. Again, just even the condensed information in here is extensive for the resources that you have. So, anybody listening out there, this is a document that shows how the money is getting spent, and it is not lavish. I will say that. So, and my compliments. I don't know why you're not insane at this point.
I don't tend to go there.
Let me use that just as a mini platform. Mike and I had a chance to exchange a bit about on page 56, where he was commenting, as he just did, about the anti-bullying program. And I don't want to get too emotional here, but as I said to Mike, I've said it at this table numerous times that, given the sparse resources that we've had, obviously you mentioned that, we still had to pick certain areas that were, in many people's minds, myself included, unacceptable as they were. And the unacceptable, the best example of things being unacceptable to me, because it's one of the few things for which I have zero tolerance, is bullying. And so 4 years ago, I sat down with a number of people, most of the principals, and we thought about what we would look like if we did it much, much, much better. 3 years ago, we developed a plan, and then 2 years ago, we started to implement it. And the person who is, Marilyn's being very modest, believe me, the great majority of this document is hers, just like the great percentage of the efforts we've made in anti-bullying is under the general heading of Janine Murphy. Okay, so when the reference here is made to mental health condition, $3,000 for the OUSD program training, but we made another investment by reordering her assignment, less supervising psychologists and the social work environment, and much more focused on anti-bullying. And she's been the district presenter to students, to staff, to parents. She is our, as I've called her, our anti-bullying czarina, you know? And she's absolutely fabulous. She's just fabulous. So, you know, I'm very proud, you know, independent of LCAP, including LCAP, very proud of where we are on that one criterion of a safe and secure environment compared to where we were in 2012-13.
Is the, I'm sorry, have you said something?
I do, but you can go ahead.
It says we're helping young people get, do better in school, like with this class, the new class that's happening at Nordoff to help incoming ninth graders figure out what they want to do with their lives. I've forgotten the name of it.
I added that at the last minute only
It's
because
good.
I was at the board meeting that night.
Yeah, and I
Get
think...
focused, stay focused.
Is there, yeah, that's it, right. Is it appropriate in LCAP to also include some kind of help for parents, like how they can help their students at home? Like, maybe creating a study area or providing quiet study time? I mean, is there any kind of provision in LCAP for that?
Goal 4 is parental involvement. I suppose we could have an activity that would involve parents, like math night, is showing parents how to access it, digital access, showing them how to help with their students. So it could come under Goal 4.
Okay, because I think that's pretty essential also, is
Yep.
what kind of home environment they have that encourages learning. And then, but I do have a specific question on page 55. The box on the top right, under annual measurable outcomes. It says percent of school connectedness was 60% in junior high and 43% in the high school. Is that from a survey that was given to the students?
It was from the Healthy Kids,
Okay.
That'd be good,
the
right?
Chicks.
Okay.
California Healthy Kids, it's known as the Chicks. California Healthy Kids Survey.
Be interesting to see how that, if that changes.
If that changes, I'm anxious too, Linda. I
It's a
thought,
class,
when I wrote that metric, I thought,
What does connectedness mean?
That
It's the California Healthy Kids
Okay,
Survey.
what does connectedness mean?
Connectedness. It says, there's percentages of connectedness. What is connectedness?
Well, it's
That's a
one
good
of the
question.
questions that they ask on the survey, and then the survey, you get results, and they call it school connectedness. How connected do you feel to your teacher? How connected do you feel to your counselor? That kind of thing.
Didn't they also ask for activity, like what activities are you involved in?
Oh, the high school portion asks a lot about drugs and alcohol.
And that, it's pretty subjective. Yeah, it is, but it's the interpretation of, when I come to school, do I feel like I'm a part of the environment? Or am I just sort of a separate individual?
I don't have the survey here, so I can't tell you exactly what questions can.
So, my first question, I think probably over the times you've come and talked about LCAP, I've made it clear that I am sort of still struggling with really understanding what it is. I mean, I've read it all, but I still, I guess part of it is not having the historical experience in the district to say, this is how it was before LCAP, this is how it is after LCAP. It is my sense, and it was sort of suggested just by Hank a second ago, where he said with LCAP, without LCAP. I mean, we are doing most of this stuff before LCAP, right?
Correct.
So this is really a new way of presenting what we do as a district. It's not necessarily we were asked to do LCAP, and now suddenly it occurred to us we have bullies and all these things. All these things were already on our mind, and we were already addressing them, right?
Yes, that's right.
That's one of your better ones.
So my question is, is there anything as a result of LCAP itself that you would like to point out? There's something sort of particularly new that was generated through this LCAP process that we're doing that we might not have been doing but for LCAP. And I don't mean to put you on the spot. I would have liked to ask that earlier, but I just thought of the question.
Section 1, the entire Section 1, stakeholder engagement.
Right.
All of that is new. And it's real local control rather than, a federal Title I plan or a Title III
Right.
plan, something like that. So you're absolutely right. The things that we are doing in LCAP are things that many of the things we were doing prior to LCAP. LCAP is just a way to be transparent, put them down in a plan, have a metric. It's a formalizing of it.
I was about to say, that's exactly what it is. It is a formalizing of many things you've already done. But if we were sitting around a table in a different school district, for example, one that is 80 to 90% qualified for that additional funding, millions of dollars would flow to create new programming. And so if you are, and we all know those districts, there's Santa Paula, it's Oxnard, it's Miami, those districts that have that population they have challenges we don't have, we have some they don't have, but they certainly have greater revenues. And so the LCAP is not just a document to formalize what we're doing and the engagement of people, but it does list many hundreds of thousands of dollars in additional programming to address those populations.
Right.
I think, for me, and I was not a great fan of the idea, but it didn't matter what I thought. I mean, LCAP, you sort of theoretically sort of don't have LCFF without LCAP.
That's right.
The other way around.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, one follows the other. I mean, more money was coming, but it was only coming if you did this. So, it was just another report that we had to do. But I find, in part because of how Maryland does it, and I think Jane referred to this, when you sit down and read it, there's a lot to learn here about how we use our time and people and resources. There is. Otherwise, we wouldn't do this. I have to tell you, we would not have written a 128-page document about what's the plan. So, I think there's something to be gained by it, in addition to stakeholder involvement, in addition to knowing that we have staff development challenges. So that's why I put at least a nominal amount in the recommended budget, $25,000. I think there's merit to it, and it's in part because it tells a story that we otherwise wouldn't tell.
I have to say that while I don't know that it's worth it just to do for this purpose, but as a result of LCAP, we're forced to write what we did in the last year. And that, to me, was a gem. To read the accomplishments of our district over the course of the last year. Now, this is a wonderful document, but because of the format, it's terribly difficult to read for just light reading material. Not taking away anything because...
In fairness, I assume it's a template.
It is.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
No, you have to do it this way. But my reason for saying that is, and I mentioned to Hank, I think it would be incredible for us to extract those pieces of what we did last year, put it, organize it in a way where you can actually read it, and make it available to the public.
Well,
And if we could force everyone to read it, that'd be even better.
No,
I'm kidding about
I
that.
not only can do that, I will do that. I mean, I write a letter every year, like every superintendent does, welcoming back, and here's what happened last year, and here's what we're sort of thinking about this year. Obviously, for 15-16, we'll be talking about some things that have not happened the last number of years. But part of the letter absolutely can reflect what you're talking about there. That would be fun to do.
And that's one thing I like about the LCAP, and it was new this year, was the annual update.
Right.
So in other words, this is what you said you were going to do, and this is what you did.
Yeah.
And so I thought, too, Thane, that part was very valuable.
And even though we sit here and we talk about it over the course of the year, this really lets us see it all in one place.
Well, and it's for me the one other spot where, I think people in the past always said, okay, well, what's the AP, sort of look at the scores, the 800, 7, that was really the only thing you could say, oh, we did do a little bit better in math, or, oh, we kind of went down in math, what's happening? These are actually additional, it's sort of a little more specific, which is, I think, a little more helpful, and also maybe helps. Hopefully, it will help push a little bit more for, hey, we wanted to get 2%. how do we push it so we get that 2%?
I have one other thing, which is obviously one of the 3 focuses of LCAP is engagement, as you said. I attended the TOPA meeting.
The regional meeting.
The regional meeting, and in all candor, there were not a lot of people there, and it was the usual suspects. One thing, I think that in the interest of transparency, I think we should put in the report how many people show up at each of those events so that we really know it's not just a statement, we engage stakeholders, we know how many. And 2, I wonder, do you have any suggestions? I mean, my wife's a PTA president, so I very much know the drill, but any ideas for how we do better with the engagement portion of this?
How about your Facebook?
Well, I put this meeting on Facebook.
I'm just kidding.
The audience can't see, but there are hundreds.
Embarrassing haircuts?
Yeah. Embarrassing haircuts.
Oh, yeah.
We lost our dog the other week, and someone heard about it, and he came up to me and goes, "Is that the punishment in the East End when you lose your dog?" No, someone found our dog.
How do we get more people?
Kevin, that problem has been around since my girls were at TOPA, so it's not a new problem. That it's like you say, the usual suspects, but I just don't know how to make it more interesting for people to want to attend, unless we tied it to something else. But I don't want it to be a bait and switch. I don't want it. They think they're going to come and play math games, and I'm going to talk about LCAP. I hesitated to tie it to something so that...
I think a barbecue might be more enticing than the math games. Just,
Yeah, food is always good.
quick feedback
Ice
here.
cream social or something like that, yeah, you're right.
Just to use your line, just so people don't think that, we're sort of unhappy with TOPA. Actually, it's exactly the opposite. Last year we had 2 meetings.
Right, right.
And the first meeting, we had like 40 people.
I was there, yeah.
You were there, and like 32 of them were from TOPA. So they have been by far our best source of involvement in last year.
And I wonder whether maybe we could make, I don't know what the requirements of the LCAP system are, but it would, I guess from my perspective, unfortunately, people like to complain, but if you were to open the meeting to, come to a meeting and talk about how you think we could make our school district better, that broad kind of idea might attract more people. Maybe the narrow parameters of the LCAP, are
A little intimidating.
yeah, and maybe make people feel like it's formalized somehow in a way that they're not ever going to be able to really.
Or that they wouldn't understand what was going on. It's
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
Well, what about online surveys, parent surveys, teacher surveys?
Yeah, we had that in 14-15, and
That was part of the report from last year.
we didn't do that, a survey again. The only surveys we did were with students. We did pupil surveys at North High School. So we could go back to doing online for parents. I mean, Survey Monkey is pretty easy to get the results.
Or every 2-year kind of a cycle.
I have to say that, just as you pointed out, Linda, I had not noticed that connectedness statistic in Nordhoff kind of shocks me.
But it's normal for high school. If you take a look at it,
Yeah.
40 to 50% of 14 to 18-year-olds. I don't want to say anything. I'm just telling you. By the time you get to that, it's hard to feel connected sometimes, other than to your friends.
You might not be connected that day when you're at the survey. That's
Or
probably
to your
it.
activities.
So-
Yeah, but I'm just pointing out, I'm not saying I like the number, but the county, we were 43 at the high school, county's 45. We're a little higher in the junior high in the county. That's not unusual for that age population.
Are there any other comments, questions?
I also wanted to say, Marilyn, your conduct, at the LCAPs that I've seen, you bring a great positivity and energy to this process, and can only do so much. Hopefully people will engage.
And you do to our meetings as well. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Marilyn.
We don't have any speaker cards, so if we can have a motion to close the public hearing
I'll move to close the public hearing.
in a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Marilyn. Great stuff. All right, moving on to our proposed budget. And maybe we'll do this the opposite, so I don't forget. Why don't we open our public hearing?
Okay, what?
So if we can have a motion to open our public hearing on the proposed budget.
Move that we open the public hearing.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Great. Why don't you...
Okay, well, Laura is here, and Laura is the author of this book, just like Carolyn is the author of this book. So I would say without hesitation that the amount of time that it took to create the adopted budget, or we call it the proposed adopted budget because it is in proposed state at this moment, and the financial information, I know many of you really worked hard through that document. What I would ask you to do with me, and we certainly answer any questions you have here, and we've answered 10 to 15 questions or so from the weekend to me, Laura, to Andy, back to you, the rest of you asked. What I'd like to do is focus our attention on the shorter version, which is the version that's in the public document tonight. And so we have our leadership representatives from CSEA. Thank you for coming. Thank you for that. Good to have Misty here, editor of the Ojai Valley News. So I'm not going to take a great deal of time to say what I've said a bit along the way, including the June 2nd meeting. But what I do want to do is to reiterate something I did say that night, and that is that the challenge in constructing the 2015-16 proposed budget, quite thankfully, was way different than it has been the last 5 years, because we actually had to make some decisions about how to apportion new dollars, and of course a big part of that was working. I had the good fortune of working between and with the board and the Ojai Federation of Teachers, and ultimately the CSEA group, to fashion our first in 7 years salary increases and the return of furlough. So the components of the spending plan then, as I said on June 2nd, and I'm saying again now, fell into 3 or 4 categories. One, of course, was making everybody whole, that is creating the 184-day calendar for teachers and classified staff who work that same calendar year. Classified staff, as Chuck and I spoke earlier, or late last week, have many different calendars, okay, but for now, let's just call it the 184-day calendar with others working more days. The administrators, of course, work more days than that. So the first step was creating the first whole school year calendar for all staff and students and parents since the 2008-9 school year. The 9-10 school year was the first year of furloughs. So you know that that investment was significant, and you can see in the public document on page 2 of 6, you can see exactly what the cost was to replace those days. Quite a bit. The 3 instructional days we know were required by the state. So the $234,000, we had no option there, no discretion. That was always going to be an additional cost. But I felt, and thank you very much for supporting me on this, that it was important to make everybody whole. And so you can see that beyond the 234 is another $176,000, $410,000 to reinstate our full year calendar. So that, as numerous people said to me, that got us back to zero, right? It got us back to zero. Everybody now is back where they were in the 2008-9 school year. It's been a long time coming. And so from that, we discussed what would be the best way to help the staff who have been so beyond integral, beyond professional over the last years, to say to them that now that we do have some resources, we want to not only thank them for that time, but to invest in them for the future and try to do something that almost parallels, even if it's only for 1 year, that is the 2015-16 year, almost parallels what's going on in the county. I don't have an exact percentage for you, as I've told you, but just listening to superintendents over the last 2 months, my belief is that the average salary increase in the county is somewhere between 3 and 5%. That's what it appears to me. Some higher, some lower, but that's about what I'm hearing. So, you know, and I haven't had a chance to talk about this in detail with Misty, but certainly will, but you know that the settlement that I'm recommending to be included in the budget that you would approve on June 30th, therefore is in the materials tonight, is the one that you helped me fashion, and that is a 2.5% increase on salary schedules for all those people who have salary schedules, and a 1% addition to that off schedule, which will cease on June 30th of 2016, perhaps to be reinstated, but with no certainty. So the impact long-term, as we know, is the increase in the salary schedules of 2.5%. So combination of reinstatement of furlough days as regular work days, and that salary increase is, of course, a big piece of the increase in expenditures for this coming year. Certainly not all, but a big piece. There are other increases. We have some increases because we have a new mathematics series, and somewhere in the neighborhood of 100,000. We have an increase in health and welfare benefits under the general heading of the new Affordable Care Act, and others. But in general, what we're talking about is approximately a $2 million increase in expenditures with about a $3 million increase in revenue. Umbrella numbers. Therefore, we're adding to our fund balance, or sort of creating a fund balance, on June 30th of 2016 of a little less than $1 million. So that's the third piece of the puzzle. You have furlough days returned, you have a salary increase, we have a fund balance, and we also have additional staffing under the heading of all those details that I sent to you, which generally can be described as 3 additional teachers, 1 additional classified staff person, and some attendant other services, but in general, 4 new people, which will help. It'll help a little bit more because we continue to have some declining enrollment, but it will help, but certainly not address all of our needs. I'd be happy to talk with you about the specifics of those new staff members and what I think will occur as a result. So, furlough days return, salary increases finally after 6 years, some additional staffing, and a fund balance that, of course, is open to any kind of interpretation. I hope I hit the right point on the continuum. And the reason it seems high, and is high for us, is because we know that in some form, to some degree, and with some pace, it will decrease and perhaps disappear. Within not a year, we certainly are expecting somewhere in the neighborhood of several $100,000, maybe if we get lucky to close to $500,000 in fund balance at the end of the 16-17 year, depending on what happens. We know things are always changing. But we could be looking at potentially some deficit that we would have to make up in the 17-18 year. At this juncture, as you can see in the materials, the only way to do that is to show reductions in staff. And again, as I've said, every year, broken record a bit, every year we always had to show some reductions in staff in order to make the budget work. So that's what that document is saying. And theoretically, we would have to cut about 7.5 positions in the 17-18 year. I don't anticipate, well, I know that won't happen because it never can be exactly right. But I certainly hope it would be close to 0 and to be determined. The only other thing I would say, and we all know how I struggled with this, the only way to even get these numbers to be these numbers for 16-17 and 17-18 was after that highly well-earned increase for staff, that the next 2 years, 16-17 and 17-18, show no increase. 0 increase in salary schedule and the rescission of the 1% that is coming in. I don't want to say more than that. It's just, it's not something that I would have even wanted to put on paper, but the only way that we can make things work 2 years out, which of course is the statutory requirement, it's not a prediction, it's just a requirement. The only way we can make things even reasonably palpable and acceptable was to show 0 increases. So there's a lot more to say. We sort of have division of labor here in terms of answering questions. We want to respond to obviously everything that you think is important. I may respond some, and Laura and Andy will be more capable than I in addressing some details, depending on what the details are. So that's it. That's the proposed budget. As you can see it laid out. And if we need to make changes, we will do so between tonight and Thursday or Friday so that we can publish the final budget for approval next Tuesday night.
Does anyone want to start?
I have a question since I've never been in this position. Is my understanding correct that if I see something and I would like us to spend more there, that I could bring that up?
Absolutely. So let's talk about that process. It's a good point. So this is one, I'll sort of take Maryland one. It's not one person's budget, but I'll just take responsibility. Okay, it's there because I presented it to you. Lots of input, lots of conversations, but it's my recommended budget. That's what you do when you're superintendent. The way I would vision it is if you feel that additional expenditures would make the budget better, as we've already discussed, there's not just one area that I can see that happening. There are probably 20 or more. But theoretically, your proposal would then be discussed at the table, and I would say just sort of the way democracy works, right? If 3 or more board members feel with you, or 2 more with you, it becomes the majority of the board, and I'm not going to fight more expenditures, okay? Because you and I, how many times have we discussed, you cannot predict what July 1st of 2017 to June 30th of 2018 will be on June 23rd of 2015. You can't, okay?
Well, that was and you and I already sort of discussed this. So basically, I guess I'm speaking to the 4 of you. I've been talking to Hank a lot about this average class size, and that by adding an elementary school teacher, we're reducing it by 1%, right? But what's actually being experienced is not necessarily, it doesn't mean that, these 8 classes actually have 1 less student. There are still teachers who are, as of today, having more students on their list come August than they had this year. So I always go back to these 16, 17, and 17, 18 years are so unknown. And they seem to be changing so dramatically every year in the governor's budget. And since we sort of have to be dramatic in getting it to 0 in 17, 18, would we be willing to make a choice that affects in a positive way our students right now, knowing that that might mean that doesn't mean this teacher is there next year and the next year and the next year. It just means we can afford this year, and we want to make the best step we can to try to have a bigger effect on these class sizes that have concerned everyone, with the knowledge that that might be affecting us down the line. But again, we know we will have continued declining enrollment. There might be other changes within the district, within the state, that I just feel like we're afraid to make a decision because of so far down the line that, and we've had to make, not me, Linda, Thane, you guys have had to make tough decisions. And I think we've been capable of doing that, and we know that we're good at being, balancing a budget when we have to. And I think that this is a a risk that is, I don't think is a bad risk. I think it's a wise risk to add another elementary instead of one full-time, to add two and see where that takes us.
I'm talking about at every school, every elementary school.
I don't know. I'd love to see specific numbers.
Sure. Well, let me just respond to that real quickly before we talk about how far to go. What I would say is, if the sense of the board tonight is to add more staff, then I believe it's my responsibility to come back to you and show you what that would look like. Okay, for example, Linda's response, good question. I would not feel that a responsible answer to more staff would be to have one new teacher in one school. Okay?
Unless the junior high and high school.
Well, I was about to get there. Okay, that's good. So the thing would be here for a minute. You know, I've given you some options. You know about this program that we've had in place since it'll be the upcoming fourth year. The $150,000 line item, which for us is a pretty big line item. And you know what the dispersion of those hourly people means. I've tried to give you sort of a numeric equality. It has about the impact, give or take, of 4 to 5 teachers, whereas if we spend $150,000 on teachers, full-time certificated people with benefits, we'd be talking probably with new teachers, if they tend to get a lower end, less expensive end of the salary schedule, 2.5, give or take, okay? So you're dealing with a factor of about 2 to 1 in the elementary schools only. Okay? Now, we've also given you the data to show that give or take a student, okay, the average class size in the 4 schools other than Summit are very close. Right? So the minors are a little bit lower right now, but they do tend to have more students walking in at the beginning of the school year. So let's just say that, back to average for a minute, that the average across those 4 schools is somewhere between mid to high 27 to 30. Okay? San Antonio being the highest. I could show you, for example, this I'm sure everybody would agree we can't afford, but I could show you what would happen. It's not very hard. I can show you what would happen if we had one new teacher in each of those schools. I can tell you right now, the average goes from high 20s to 25. I mean, it's not necessarily 26. It's not necessarily a huge 3 to 5 student difference, but it makes a difference. And I can show you, because I've already asked the elementary principals this, exactly what the numbers would look like with that additional teacher. You'll be a little surprised in a couple of cases to see that while that teacher has a major impact on one grade, or maybe 2 grades, it doesn't affect the other grades very much at all. And the problem then is, is this an all net add-on? So for example, let's just pick the number 3. If we had 3 new teachers, just say with the elementary for that, 3 new elementary teachers at a cost of around $200,000 or so, including benefits. Does that mean that we're adding $200,000 to the $150,000 line item, right? Which reduces the student-adult ratio along the ways that you've seen in the document that I gave you, or are we adding $200,000 and taking 75 out? You see what I'm saying? So there are a lot of options. That's at the elementary level. Going back to your point. Okay, think again with me here. Every 5 sections at the high school or the junior high, or the combination of 2, is that same one teacher. Okay? I gave you 2 examples, actually 3 examples, of how the additional staff will be used at Nordoff and Matilaha, 2 in science and another subject area. I could come up easily with 10 to 15 sections between the 2 schools, therefore 2 to 3 teachers there, right, of additional staffing, and you would see average class sizes in the various disciplines and the grade of the discipline, 10th grade English or whatever, dropping pretty radically. So because remember, if you start out with 5 classes of 35, right, so you have 175, if you have 6 classes instead of 5, you can do the math. You're under 30. You go from 30 to 35 to 30 just with 1 more section. That's only 1. Right? So if you had 5 of those, now you have an additional teacher. So I got to tell you, there's nothing that would make me more excited, okay, than giving you a list of 6 to 7 additional full-time equivalents. But I'd also have to show you the financial impact. Okay, so you would see that we could, quote, afford it, we could find dollars in the 15-16 school year budget to pay for all. However, instead of having a positive fund balance in 16-17, I don't even have to do the analysis. I know it would be negative. And then you also know the negative in 17-18 would be enormous. All that having been said, you know, there's some best point on the continuum between spending less than I'm recommending we spend next year and spending a lot more. And that's why I started out my comments by saying that the challenge with this budget was to take all of these new dollars, call them $3 million, and allot them to those three areas. If you sort of combine furlough days and staff salary increases together, that's one. New staffing on second, and the third being fund balance. And I agree, the smallest of the three is new staffing. It is. Because the first one's big, and the last one is big so that we don't theoretically run out of money.
Right. Well, I look at, I mean, I know that we kind of get stuck on that sort of average, you know, sort of like saying, well, my son is not my son, my daughter, since I don't have a daughter. My daughter is a B average student. Don't notice that she has a D- over there, right? So it's like that her average is B's. So I don't want that to happen. I don't want parents to walk in and go, what? 33 kids? Last year I was in a class of 30. What's happening?
Well, that can happen. I have to say
Or
that
teachers the same way.
I can show you. In fact, it's easy to show you. I'll show you later this week. I'll show you what the average class, what the actual class sizes were, class by class, school by school, at the beginning of this school year. And I can show you what we're projecting for next year. And the fact is, I know exactly where they are. There are 3 or 4 spots where that exact situation would occur. But there are 2 to 3 times that where the number is less. Okay? So if the goal is to have, and I'm trying to put words in, but if the goal is to have a parent of a 3rd grader not be disappointed because the 3rd grade class next year is bigger than the 2nd grade class this year, I can't make that happen everywhere. I can't. So, but boy, is it a great goal. You know?
I think I would rather see the elimination of multi-grade level classes. However we can do that, rather, you know, for student learning, I think that's a better, for me, that's a better goal.
And I can tell you, Linda, that, you know, one of the main goals of having this significant line item was to have that actually occur almost always.
Except in some.
Well, so some, of
Yeah.
course. San Antonio, of course, you know, because with 5 teachers, you can't. With 5 teachers in 7th grades, I don't know how to get rid of conflict major
Why
classes.
not?
But anyhow, but in the other 3 schools, and even in some, even in San Antonio, there are ways to do it. The whole point, which is why I sent you all this, is, you know, the principals have become so creative. You've heard them when they come talk at single plan presentations, right? When they have those dollars, $30,000 to $50,000 in the large schools, and they can hire a certificated teacher, sometimes, actually they tend to hire people on the 2 ends of the experience scale. Right? Retired and trying to get into the profession. Right? So, but the rate actually is about the same. It's about $30 an hour. Classified staff doing other kinds of things, but greatly important, less than that. So the point is to try to eliminate combination classes as much as possible and to drive those high 20 numbers down to the low 20s. Most of the time, particularly for core subjects. Right? Obviously math and ELA. It's not perfect, but there's very little that we've done over the last 5 years or 6 years that I can describe that with. I will say, for those elementary staffing and class size advocates, what we have in the elementary schools, this significant investment in for us of $150,000, it doesn't appear in the high school or junior high. It's only in the elementary schools. Right? So a class size in the high school and junior high is the class size. There's no other kind of environment out there where the kids get separated out, except that's the point of this initiative to try to create an intervention pilot program where we are going to create, you know, a little bit of a midpoint between the classroom where some students are struggling and the group of people getting together to determine whether that student or those students should be considered for special education. So I'm happy, whatever the sense of the board is, to show you both the academic, educational impact of more staffing and the financial impact.
Well, I do, this is maybe a question for the principals. I know when Jack was in 5th grade, he was in a 4-5 combo. But that meant something a lot different back then, because the 4th graders were hardly ever there. So to me, I felt like, wow, he's in a class of 13.
Yeah,
it was fabulous.
Some of that occurred.
So if there's a way to sort of, it's almost like you have a team. Your teacher isn't A. Your teaching team is ABC. If principals looked at, maybe we have this person who teaches science to all our 4th, 5th, and 6th grade classes or something, instead of, so that they're being pulled out wherever they are, and there are things going on. I don't know. But will that by boosting the 150?
Maybe. Sure. We do. Again, that's another option. Actually, I have a bit of, I call it my pocket a little bit, for special circumstances to increase that. If there were special needs, examples shown that I principal can achieve something, whether it's the elimination of the combination class in a key subject area, core subject area, I could absolutely come up with some additional money. The principals do that, and I'm not going to pick one over another because I don't want to disparage something that might do not choose. But they do a lot of that. I also have to tell you, though, that I've walked into classrooms where it's really clear that this side of the room is 4th grade and this side of the room is 5th grade. So they do that too. And I've always marveled at how well they do that, how well the teachers do that. But, if for example, the sense of the board at the elementary level was to come back and show you a plan to, let's use the word eliminate combination classes, I can show you that. And we already had a conversation about that. It might not be 100% of the day, but it could be a much higher percentage than we have now. Obviously at some greater cost. A big part, though, of that $150,000 is already being used for that. Now, not all of it, because as you saw from the text I wrote, I insisted, actually, in part because people around this table and who felt similarly, I insisted that a disproportionate percentage of those dollars be driven down to K through 3. Okay? Because all you have to do is go back to 2008-9, right? The last year of class size reduction, and even in 2009-10, my first year here, most of those K through 3 classes were around 20. And they have increased by far the most in the district over the last 6 years. That's why I've been trying to drive whatever resources we can find down there. So anyway, you started a conversation about additional spending, and I've talked a lot. I'd rather just listen.
I would just like to share my thoughts briefly. The first is, I couldn't be more pleased that we're having this conversation, because we've never had a conversation about, can we spend more money before? So that's fantastic. Yeah, exactly. So that's number one. Number two is I didn't want to see this budget in the first place without doing something to address class sizes. So we do have that in there. I know you know that we're talking about doing even more, but it's important to know for anyone who's listening that we are increasing our investment to have lower class sizes to some extent.
Could we get a clarification though? Because obviously, as Hank just pointed out, some classes are actually, in fact, going to be even bigger.
But on average.
Yeah. On average, that's
absolutely, yeah.
What will the number be? Do we know what
right.
an average?
Yeah, indicated here. The reduction. Let me just use average now, because we have 45 elementary classrooms. I can't give you the sign. I can actually have it in the office, but I can tell you that there are more classes under 30 next year, more under 30 than there are this year. That's a positive. You're not going to get a huge decrease in the number under 30 compared to this year when you're only decreasing the average by 1. Okay, but there are more. And just to be specific, the number of students at Summit and San Antonio are almost identical to this year. 2 teachers at Summit, 5 at San Antonio. We've been through this before, but just to state it again, because it's important. The school that has 1 less teacher next year at this juncture is Topa because they have a big 6th grade lead, relatively small kindergarten projected to come in. A total enrollment decline of about 40 or so, which is more than a class, and therefore 1 teacher was cut in the first iteration of this budget. Then as the weeks went on, and I told you some things that I think we can achieve by responding very positively to both intra and inter-district requests, I added that teacher that wasn't in the budget to Miramonte, because that's where the enrollment requests were greatest. So that elementary enrollment at Miramonte is up pretty significantly from where it was about a month and a half ago. So the teacher was added back. 13 teachers instead of 12. And at Miners Oaks, where the enrollment right now is less than this past year, I kept the 10 teachers. I told you, and I've said many times, I think given some of the challenges that we know exist there, and we want to respond to them, felt that the average class size should be a little bit lower. So that's where the additional teacher was added, only in comparison to the first iteration of this coming year's budget. We actually have the same number of teachers as we had this year. We just had fewer kids. Right. And so, look, believe me, I'm not going to sit here for a minute and try to convince you that having the same number of teachers for 45 less elementary students district-wide, so 1290 compared to 1335 or 40. Or adding 2 sections, maybe 3, maybe 4 to Nordhoff, and 1 or 2 at the Tillaha is some great class size reduction program. It's not. It isn't, okay? The intervention program, I'm going to communicate a little bit on that. That one I'm pretty excited about, but it's still only a pilot. We're putting 2 sections at Nordhoff, 1 in the Tillaha, and the equivalent of about a section and a half or so, and across the elementary schools for the reasons that I told you, right? To sit between the challenge kids in the regular classroom and special education, because our special education percentage in this district is way too high.
Is that because we have 504 designations?
No, it's because we haven't had that intervention program available where almost every other district has 1 or more. And so we only had a choice between staying in the regular classroom or becoming special ed. Okay? And so, our percentage is just way too high. Highest in the county by quite a bit.
Wow.
So I think the time has come to make an investment. I'd like to have 3, going back, I'd like to have 3 times that much. 3 FTEs just for intervention. I'd like to have 2 to 4 more classified staff, new positions. There's 1 in there right now, and I told you that I'm giving Andy some time over the summer to work with his people, and I may well come back with a second come August. And so, there are just, remember I told you that I asked every principal and every director to give me I call it a wish list, but let's call it a wish list, okay? I just put some numbers on it. It was well beyond $3 million. And every one of them was legitimate. Every one. There wasn't a crazy idea in there. So, believe me, I have all the information I need to come back to you with another look at expenditures. And there are a lot of ways to do this. One is, here's another thought, so that I can feel lower over there. Oh my God, you're going to change the budget. Okay, here's a way to do it. Here's a way to do it. One is the budget that I'm presenting to you is, I'm thinking positively, rational, acceptable given the criteria that I've outlined. However, there's still a sense that you'd like to see some amelioration of these class sizes that are sort of. We're still going to have $1 million on August 18th, right? We have the money we have now; it's still going to be there. So you don't have to make a decision tonight. You don't have to make a decision on June 30th about how to spend the fund balance. I can come back, believe it, I've done this numerous times. We've added elementary teachers 3 days before the school year started.
Right, we used to have like a ghost.
Yeah, I don't like ghosts. I know, I heard about that.
So-
Okay. There aren't any ghosts in here. This is it. This is it. Okay, there are no hidden spots in here. This is the plan.
Well, because
Okay,
you don't-
well, we did do that. I know.
Because your enrollment is a projection.
Yeah.
So even you're looking at your class sizes now, what they are, well, what happens in September?
Well, no kidding. I mean,
And then what about the loss from seabeds to the end of October? We lost 30-something this year.
Well, that's after they've already hired
So,
people.
I know, but I'm just saying, you've got a lot of variables out there.
Every year, when I was assistant high school principal and superintendent, every year, the staffing in the high school changes. Every year, because kids show up. It's like, remember what Greg wrote about, right? There are 50 kids in biology, right? So what you try to do is move them around. Well, they can't be moved, okay? So we need another section. That's where his first priority would be.
In the chemistry class, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. So chemistry is another example. So, I have no doubt that I will get requests from Greg and counselors a week or two before school starts. We need more sections here. So what I'm saying to you is that another way of looking at this, is to monitor the enrollment through the summer, which we always do anyway. See what, let's stay with elementary for a minute, see what those numbers look like. See what Miramati is, that can have 387 kids or 402 kids. Token, pick up another 10 or lose 10. And I can show you class sizes, actual class sizes at the beginning of the school year, and show you where it looks like the best investment would be for additional staff. Now, I can tell you that while I would love to come back to you and say, I'd like 3 to 7 FTE additional, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do it. But I'm telling you, Marilyn, she's been at the table. I can think of at least 3 school years where we added an elementary teacher within a week or two before school started. Okay, because kids showed up. Yeah, kids showed up. Can't remember if we did it last year. Did it in San Antonio, you're absolutely right. Yeah, we had 4 in San Antonio and it became 5 because the 128 became 151. Exactly right. Right. And I know it's going to happen in secondary schools. I absolutely know.
I know it was in 6th grade, it happened, I think, the day before.
There you go.
I do have a few more thoughts on this.
I'm just rattling.
No, it's fine.
Go ahead.
One goes along those lines. I know every year we've looked at the budget through the year, and while we have a requirement to pass a budget, we have re-looked at the budget through the year.
We always do.
Yeah, so it's not locked in stone, even though we have it. And the other goes to the point of we don't know what's going to happen in the next couple of years. We don't know for good and we don't know for bad. I know in the last few years there have been times where we had a meeting and the news we got was, oh good, we have an extra X amount of dollars, and we have had meetings when it was, we have less, and what are we going to do about it? What concerns me is 17, 18. The state, these numbers aren't in stone, but the state has given us an idea about what they expect to give us in 17, 18, and it's not a pretty picture. The reason we were budgeting to have money in the fund was to pay for expenses in the coming years, and while I want to do everything we can to reduce class sizes, I don't want to reduce class sizes by, 1 student this coming year and then have to increase it by 5 2 years out because
But this still shows
We're
a
broke.
fund balance of 361.
No, this is, okay, so this is, no, this is what goes forward. This goes forward this way, so.
So it's not in the negative.
Yeah, but it's only here. Another way of looking at it is.
in the dark space,
Yeah.
it's 0.
Here, this is not a prior year.
Get it to zero
Not a pri-
again.
It's not a prior year.
Oh, prior year, all right.
So the 964, I was talking about, that's June 30th of 2006.
Yeah, it's hidden. Not only is it fine
The
print,
number,
but it's
the
blacked
number,
out.
well, no, come on now. The number that, you know, is the unfortunate one is at the very end of page 6, right?
Black Friday. it's a lot.
Yeah, page 6. So, you know, the last one shows, you know, theoretically, we would need to cut $500,000 of some,
And that already assumes that we're cutting personnel.
no, that is the kind of person.
7.3.
Right, but I mean, we get to zero, it would be less than zero if we didn't assume cuts of
Well, in
personnel.
16, 17, we're not.
I'm talking about 17.
17, oh, yeah, well, 17, we have to cut.
Right.
We have to cut. We don't cut, we don't have enough.
And if we spend more money this year, the cut's even bigger. Unless we
have
get
to
more
agree-
money.
I have to agree with that. Yeah, I just pick out more money from it. On the revenue side, okay, I was pretty certain that on June 1st, that on June 30th, we were going to see more money from the state. Not so much at 14, 15, 15, 16. I was just sure. All the indications were, and you know, I sent you an email a couple of days ago, not so. We're getting a little bit more at 14, 15, and then the
Oh,
cumulative.
that's the 250,000.
The cumulative, you know, we're not going there. We're not going to be there. The cumulative effect of 15, 16 to 17, 18 is, and 14, 15 on the positive side is negative, a little more than $100,000. I mean, that's disappointing. It's very disappointing. But it's also not going to be the case. It'll change. I'm just saying, as of June 23rd, I'm disappointed. I don't know what else to say.
And you mentioned fear, yes. I have a fear of not having money and having to cut back personnel and drastically cutting class sizes. And it's not that far in the future. It's 2 years.
I think you misspoke. You said cutting class sizes, meaning increasing class sizes.
Well, no, in 2 years.
So cutting classes?
Staff.
Yeah, cutting
staff.
Cutting staff. Got it.
Increasing class sizes.
Got it, yeah.
You know, just because I did the research, right? So I talked to the principals, and in one particular school, when I asked the question, and I made it a forced choice. I said, look, you know, would you rather have one more teacher or no support dollars? I mean, I know you can do both, or some of them. Well, it's probably an elementary school. You can't do some of it. You can't do some of an elementary teacher. It just doesn't work very well. You can hire someone for the morning, you know, half a teacher, or choosing the morning. But I'd rather hire the hourly person to do that, or more than 1 hour person. Anyway, so I asked the teacher, and so I asked the principal that. The principal went back, looked at what the additional teacher would be, and literally, because of the construction of the number of students in the grades in that school, the only place where that teacher would have had an effect was in one grade with 64 students. And instead of having 2 32s, there were 2 21s and 22. That was it. Every other thing stayed the same. Every other construction stayed the same. And theoretically, in my little challenge here, all of the support dollars were gone. So, I mean, that's sort of an example at an elementary level.
So can we talk about increasing support level?
I mean,
Slightly?
beyond 150?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's a number, it's a number. It's a number that was 100,000 a few years ago. It's grown to 150. And if you put another 25 in, you can figure it out. You got another 15, 20% of impact. And it is not recurring dollars. I mean, I know in your description, actually a teacher is not recurring dollars, right? Because you said you can hire someone, and you're right. You can withdraw.
There's no guarantee that we can do
The
it.
problem is then you're sitting around a year from now, where the parents saying, boy, in 2015, 16, I had 25 kids. The teacher disappeared and now I have 29. What it was then? So it's not easy to make people feel good about their situation when you have our limited resources.
But having said everything I've said, I'm happy to look at different constitutions.
Sure.
And much more open to looking at one-time dollars than commitments.
What would the principals want? I guess that's.
I asked them.
That's important.
I'm not putting names on it. One immediately said the hourly amount. Second one initially said hourly amount, and then went back and did the exact research that I just told you and found out that the only thing that could happen was that one grade was divided into 3 instead of 2. Came back to now hourly dollars. The third person was a little bit on the fence, and if she said if I'm pushed, hourly dollars. So now, the ideal, of course, would be to have one less teacher in each of those situations. And San Antonio, because actually San Antonio is the highest average class, projected right now, and some hourly dollars. But I'm telling you that we've talked a lot about elementary, and they do have that one significant revenue stream that doesn't exist in secondary schools. But I just know that there are double-digit situations between Warnoff and Matilah where you would say, wow, that's really cool. That's what $15,000 got us, which is about 12 to 15,000, depending on who you hire. That's what that one additional section brought.
So do you look at, San Antonio being the highest numbers, do you look and say, well, those students who are trying to transfer who don't really live in this area, we got to say no?
We actually do that. That's exactly what we do. I mean, when I say it's the highest by 0.3. It's 30.1 instead of high 29, or 29, mid-29s compared to 30. So it's not very much different. But that's exactly what we do. There's a point in time, right? 2/3 of the students who are in San Antonio don't live there. So we try to accommodate as many intra-district requests as we can because it keeps people feeling good about where they are. I already told you we maximize as many inter-district requests as we can, so it helps our revenue flow the next year. We have more coming, in part because we've done that this year, coming in. But actually at all schools, we have a cutoff time. Right now, we have some intra-district requests that are in a holding pattern. And we'll see what happens, going back to that August thing. First thing, as soon as the principals come back, which is a full week before staff come back, first thing we do, Marilyn and the principals and I sit down and we take a look at all the names, all the requests, we double check to see who actually is coming back from the people we thought would come back. And, then we try to accommodate more, the best we can.
Is there any grade level where we will not have room for any students? I believe some years ago was the grade.
Right, I did cut it off, right, because we were really tight on staffing. I'd have to look at that, Linda. I can't think of I don't know, Marilyn, you know, I can't think of a full grade. Fourth grade is the highest. That would be the closest, because they're pushing, even there are a couple of spots that are a little lower, but.
Because of Monica Ross?
No, it's just what happens. It's just like more kids show up in 1 year. But we're not talking about, there are definitely spots K-3 because the class sizes are low.
Fourth grade has 206 students
Okay.
coming back. It's the highest. The lowest is 167
Okay, so
in first grade.
206, but even then, you don't know, it might not be divided by 7, right? Because that would be about 30, but you don't know that because there might be a combination. But anyway, that would be about how we work.
Actually, sixth grade, 220.
Well, there you go. But they probably have another teacher.
Yeah.
Hopefully. So anyway, I can show you all kinds of permutations. I think, I would like, because I enjoy doing it, I would like to monitor the class sizes over the summer with a commitment to you that I will show you well before the August 18th board meeting, okay, what our numbers look like. Okay? And I will show you then, first of all, maybe we'll know more about revenues, maybe we'll know more about expenditures, but on the staffing side, I can show you the impact of adding X, Y, Z. And one of those options could well be $25,000 on the line item, and what impact that would have, okay? Which of course is less than half the cost of a teacher, and the cost of 2 sections at the secondary school. So, it is really a zero-sum game. I mean, it truly is. So that's where I am. I'm not thrilled with the amount of staff that I've been able to include in this budget, but I think it's responsible given the significant and an absolutely appropriate commitment that we made to our staff. But I'll continue to look at it and see where we can do better. So I would recommend that. We don't have to do anything now. On June 30th, if you give us the go-ahead to produce the final budget, given these numbers, that's what we'll do. If you want to move in a different direction, then we need direction.
Mike, you know.
Yeah, I just, because class size, I think, is important for everybody. And I recognize this is a budget conversation, so we're talking about budget dollars. But my question is staffing the only approach to class size? Is there any other? Because I recognize we're talking about budgets, but when we talk about class size reduction, it seems to me it's potentially a larger conversation. And so, to whatever extent there are strategies that are not just staffing, if you bring us those models, I'd like to see that as well.
I promise you I will look.
Can you give me an example of what you're
Yeah, I mean,
Well, I'm just...
but
In terms, I have 2 elementary schools. Are all of the classes equally full, for instance? Because staffing is only going to go in one place, right? And then I have another school and another and another.
Right.
So how do I impact all of those schools without hiring another 10 teachers?
Right. So the answer to the question is, other than Summit, we'll get there in a second, the other 4 schools are pretty close to equally full. Okay, so, I mean, we're sort of between, I can just use the average class size, it's the only particular criterion that I can draw on at this moment. As I said, Miners Oaks, right at this moment, is on the low end of the continuum of basically high 27s to 30. So there's not a great deal of difference. I think Miners Oaks will probably increase more in the 28 to 9 range, and we just won't let, as best we can, let the others get any larger. The problem, of course, is that if you have an influx of kids who live in the school district, you got to find some place to put them. Okay, and we want to do that, and we also have to make a commitment at some juncture to those people who want to come into the district, and we've done that, but we also now have this holding pattern of both requests to go to large grades in a school and also inter-district requests beyond those that we've approved. So,
Do you have a deadline, like you taught them by July 30th?
It floats a little bit. I mean, at one point it was May 15th. Okay, we did that. And then more came in and I looked at it. I told you that one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons why I added the teacher at Vermont is because we had a significant influx of requests inter-district to come to the district, and the majority were seeking that school.
And that's Petra Battleson?
No, that's where she's going.
Right.
Right.
But that's the
She
you said
moved
adding the teacher.
She moved from Topa. Well, she moved from Topa to Vermont actually without those kids. She would have gone anyway.
Okay.
Okay, so now we have another teacher who's the 13th teacher. Petra would have been the 12th, or is the 12th. But by the way, we had many retirements from Vermont. So I'll send you the staffing. I'll send you the people soon. Anyway, so that's what that was. But the good news is that I've told you before, we have a very significant number of our students who are inter-district students, and we appreciate them.
I have some unrelated questions, but I think it's important that we really
I just wanted to-
kind of figure out what we want to do on this topic, and so.
I have some questions.
Yeah.
Some, I guess, comments. First, I think it would be helpful for us to get metrics that are school-specific and not just broad. In other words, I'd love to see the plan for TOPA. I'd like to see the plan for Miramani. So both average class sizes and largest class size at that school and smallest class size at that school.
Easy.
I think this whole conversation just underscores that every single dime spent in this district is just crucial.
Agonized over.
It's vital, and has to be spent perfectly almost. And I'm just abroad, in the interest of transparency. I mean, this issue of class size has been discussed by us collectively, and there was obviously a choice to be made with respect to new money and the recognition of the sacrifice of the teachers in particular, but the whole staff. And we, I think, collectively chose to use most of the discretionary money to bring them close to something like parity, and we're not even there with their peers. And I will add, I've read some books on education and why some places do better than others. And I am convinced that one of the significant aspects of high quality education is that you pay teachers as if they're very important to you. So, that said, I have 3 kids in the district, and the school size, the class sizes is very important to me, and it's as I sit here, I'm somewhat dispirited to know that we can't do it all. But I definitely think that it seems to me that the most efficient, best use of each dime, as I said, is along the lines of what you're planning to do, which is that that $150,000 and maybe some more money towards an hourly support for the teachers who have the larger classes. And then another thing that occurs to me, and it may be utterly impossible, but the prospect of also engaging more volunteerism in the classrooms. I know some people, particularly in the art area, really support the schools, and but I don't know what alternatives there are based on certification, things like that. But at any rate, that's kind of my take on it all.
So I just have a legal question, actually. We're required to pass a budget by the 30th, correct? Okay.
Yeah, on the 30th or earlier.
Right.
In this case, it'll be on the 30th.
Right. So we need to make a decision. The question really is, are there changes that we want to try to make this week on this topic? I'm happy to look at anything, but just procedurally, how do we do that? Or do we want to go ahead with this basic outline and then work at revising it in August? Because we can change it anytime, we just have to pass it.
Yeah, you wouldn't be changing the budget in August. We would be, as Kevin used the term, transparent. We would be transparent about a change in the spending pattern that's in the budget. Okay, so the budget, these line items will change. We talked about a lot. The line items change during the course of the year, but what I'm saying to you tonight is, I think the best plan tonight is to give us the go-ahead to just construct the statutory required document, okay, which will reflect these numbers, with my absolute commitment to you that I will show you several plans for additional spending to reduce the effective class size at both the elementary level and the high school, including both the hiring of X number of staff and the additional, as another option, the add-on to this $150,000 line item. And I'll show you, as I have it in my office, I'll just show you the projected class sizes at the elementary level. Not so much, it's a little hard to do at the secondary level right now because the master schedule is in flux. But I can show you exactly what Marilyn and the principals and I think the class sizes will be on the first day of school. I can show you what it looks like now. Okay? And then all you have to do is just take the document that I gave you on Friday and just attach it to it. Okay? Because this is what happens when the hourly amount is distributed. This is what happens to the numbers that I'll show you.
So this isn't a vote because we're not done, but is anyone not in favor of that plan?
I think that's good. That's a good, safe plan. And I think
I mean, again, in the interest of transparency, this is in keeping with, I think, where we've been headed, and we recognize this is where we're headed, and I agree that that's where we should continue to go.
Okay, great. Are there any other questions? I have some, but I'm happy for. No? Kevin, any other questions?
No.
I got some answers, but I asked questions to staff, but I didn't fully understand the questions. I mean, I understood the question. I didn't fully understand the answer. So let me just, the first one is on this ACA line item.
Yeah, glad you asked. Okay, good.
And I don't need to rehash all the questions I asked the staff previously.
But you understand, but it's really important, okay? It's really important. And I'm going to start, and then I'll let Andy pick up more. Okay. So when you look at these assumptions, right, first of all,
Are you on page 2 or page 3?
yeah, on page 2.
Well, yours is different. I don't have a page number.
Okay, no, this is in the book. Right, that's why I wanted you to look at this.
Oh, okay.
Look at the little book, okay? The public, because we did have a couple of iterations.
Well, it's not, it's the same here.
Yeah, right. Well, it's sort of the same, but not quite. Okay. Yeah, right. So we're not making numbers up. It's just that we had different iterations of the assumptions page as the day unfolded. But in any case, what I wrote to you this afternoon, right, after Andy and Laura and I met, is the explanation of that line. And since I have talked incessantly over the last 45 minutes, I'm going to let Andy explain what that line is, where it says includes ACA at 100,000.
Right.
Okay. Take it away.
And before you do that, let me just tell you my bias, that I really don't like to see TBD in a budget. And if it's in another line item, can we get rid of that line item? Or, but go ahead.
We can, easily. Go ahead.
So just to make sure everyone's familiar with the question, we were talking earlier about identifying whether or not the proposed approximately $100,000 expenditure to offer benefits at a level that we haven't previously for staff who are at 6 hours a day or more that qualify for a ACA plan. Is that included in this information? The confusion came where you see the Affordable Health Care Act amount, we have TBD, and I agree with you, especially if we know what the number is or have some idea and we're using a number to budget, then it's
Even
more
if I
appropriate.
don't, I still,
You don't like it.
So
I don't want to see it.
I
yeah.
assure you we will make that revision for next week. The question though is, does that amount immediately above it, the health and welfare increase, include the amount for ACA? And the answer is yes. You can see we actually have it parenthetical prior to actually entering into the columns where we have the numbers where we state that includes ACA 100K. So if we had not included the ACA amount of about $100,000, it'd only be a $35,000 increase approximately for health and welfare in 15-16. Where it gets a little confusing is that each of these numbers in the out years are increases over the prior year's base. So yes, ACA $100,000 is included in the budget for 16-17 and 17-18. However, it's not part of the $198,000 you're seeing in 16-17 or the $212,000 because it's already been assumed as part of the base, and those numbers are only talking about the increase from the prior year.
So there's a lot of new money.
That 100,000 is to offer
So
employees who
part of the Affordable Care Act requires that by starting October 1, that all employers of a certain size make a decision. Do you want to begin paying a fine of $3,000 a year by not offering an affordable health care plan to all employees who work an average of 30 hours a week? Or will you offer them an affordable health care plan? Lots of details as to what constitutes an affordable health care plan, but what the choice that we're proposing and that I think that we've heard the support from the board has been is rather than paying a fine, we want to support our employees and do right by offering that benefit plan. So the approximate cost, not knowing how many are going to take us up on the opportunity, is $100,000 to offer approximate. This only applies really to classified personnel. There's one or two, a small number of certificated, and a small number of even potentially subs or other groups, but predominantly this impacts our classified employees who are working on average 6 hours a day or 30 hours a week, who do not currently qualify for benefits because we give benefits at 6.5 hours a day or 32.5 hours per week. So it's the employees who fit into that category of 30 hours to 32.5 who will now be offered a plan and the approximate cost of that is going to be about $100,000 to the employer, and the employee will pick up the remainder of the cost.
Well, let me ask that because I remember seeing somewhere that we have a capless, like.
Capless, we are capless. There are some districts, right, I sent you the list
We'll
of
pay
districts
your
that
health
have
insurance
a
up
cap.
to a
No,
certain
we pay
amount.
100% and we don't have a cap.
So,
That's part of the negotiation.
It absolutely is.
And along those lines, by the way, I've been interested in monetizing that because I do think the public should know, and this, certainly teachers should know, that we offer them,
I
you know,
agree.
highly competitive, probably in the one area where we actually do pretty well
We
among
know,
their peers.
we know, they know, and I'd be proud to say it's the only place we're in the upper quartile.
Because there's not a lot of businesses that are doing
I know
that
that.
anymore.
I know
That's
that.
one of the things that they've sort of said. Health insurance has gotten so expensive that.
I was really happy to see that we aren't near the top.
We are, I'd say we're out of 20, it depends on exactly how you count, but 4th, 5th, 6th, sort of in that range, depending on the year, depending on how you look at the expenditure, but it's solid, it's very solid.
It's been a constant desire of teachers to keep that. I mean, meetings for going, I could go back 20 years and, you know, that's a topic of discussion at all of the teachers' meetings.
You know, one of the trade-offs for not limiting an employer's contribution is, as from the employer's perspective, is you expect to see a very robust cost control of the plan. So I would expect to see every year people are looking at it and tweaking it and messing with those co-pays and all of that other stuff, because that's really, that's how you keep us from imposing a cap, is to show us that you are responsibly using the plan and spontaneously controlling the cost. Because if that's not happening, then ultimately we do have to go there.
Or maybe just explain, because I think it's really worth a couple of minutes. From where do our employees get their insurance, health and welfare? From what source? And how is that issue addressed
Where they
by
get
the
the
source?
information on our plan.
No, not information. Actually, from whom do they get the insurance plan?
Blue Cross, Aetna.
You know, who is it that provides it?
Anthem Blue Cross.
Okay.
Through CIS.
Okay. Don't do that acronym. Right, what is it? What is this? What is this?
I'll bet state is in there somewhere.
Right, okay,
Schools.
but the point is,
There somewhere.
the point is, it is a collective, it's a collective district plan. It's a collective district plan. How many districts just generally are in that plan?
self-insured schools of California.
Okay, so it's like numerous, okay, but you can get the same.
JPA in the state. of
Yeah,
California.
exactly. So, but to get to Mike's point, when you're in the plan, and there are a couple hundred or however many, it's up to the district to determine what to charge, right? Okay, so you might all get a very similar package, but this district, way before I came, as Laura said, as Linda said, made the decision to cover that. Okay? So I'm confident, I mean, I don't go to the meetings, but I am confident that JPA and the insurance group does exactly what you said. I am confident they do that. However, it's just this huge mystery every spring as to what number they're going to give us, right? So we got a great number this spring. And you know how much I've struggled in the last month over trying to monetize, you know, what might happen in the next 2 years. I mean, as recently, you were telling me, why don't you tell me? What did we hear recently about what might, I read an article in the paper a week ago that said 7% or more is going to hit. And then you told me today.
Right, so on one side, LA Times just released an article that CalPERS, and actually SSC has confirmed that CalPERS approved it, a substantial increase, double-digit increase in their insurance costs, their PPO costs, predominantly because of pharmaceuticals. So most within the state view the PERS plan as kind of bellwether of where things are going. So given that they saw such a large increase, likely that's going to trickle over to other plans. We don't know if it's actually going to enter into CIS. What we've heard likewise in the past year or so is that it does actually look like in the CIS plans that in the next couple of years, that's more likely to be something in that lower single digit, that 1% we saw this year, and going forward something smaller than the historical average, which has been about 7%. So
Therefore, we have no clue.
right. That's a long way of
Well, wait,
saying we have no clue.
that line item is about $280,000 a month.
It makes a very
right?
big difference
A
on
month.
that. Yeah.
Absolutely right.
$280,000
Well, and,
in health insurance.
you know, that's the struggle on these budgets, is it's not only, it's not only that we don't know what's going to happen from year to year, we don't know what's going to happen from month to month. And so it's a real frustration in going through this process.
Can I get a
Yeah.
quick one in, just along CISC? I don't know how familiar you've gotten with it yet, Andy, but I brought this up before. It was mentioned that we apparently don't get re-rated individually based on our actual claims history in our district. Do you know anything about that?
I can look into that.
In other words,
Well,
Like, in other words, if our,
they look at our county.
county.
oh, okay, so it's not.
They look at our county,
Okay.
and we don't get thrown in with Santa Barbara. I know that for a fact. Santa
Right.
Barbara's always getting higher rates than us. Other than that.
Maybe
it's not by
maybe it's like auto insurance, where they go by zip code or something, Anyway, just curious. Thanks.
There was just one other thing I felt I needed to bring up in this meeting, and that is, in the interest of transparency and because every penny matters, can you give us a little better understanding of what some of these other costs are?
Where is it at?
Especially the other outgoing on page 3 of 6 under expenditures. And not everyone, because I understand the purpose of other is because there are a lot of things that aren't categorized. But sometimes in the other category, there are some
Okay, this time we'll go.
things that you know
A little more on
about.
that. So you're talking about the right below capital outlay, other outgoing?
Yeah, the other outgoing. That's your object 7,000s. Basically, it's the excess cost that we pay for the special ed students that are served through county programs.
Okay.
The county provided programs is charged there.
Okay.
They're aged out, they're over 18, but we pay for them through.
Or
We have some who are
they have-
regular students.
They need a specialized service that we can't offer in the district. Our OHI Teams program that we added to Nordoff is run through the 7,000 object code.
Right. And the reason we do it there rather than a special ed item is because these codes are statutory on the budget
The county requires us to,
to use these line
and
items.
it's just beginning last year is now unrestricted. We used to book it in the restricted column. Still in the 7,000 object code, but in restricted, and now the counties have the districts change to reporting it unrestricted, and then the county reports it at the SELPA level as restricted
Right.
to the state.
No, that's good. I just think that's really important for everybody to know that what that is.
Yeah.
Even though, because we have to show it this way,
Right,
but we do know what it is.
yeah.
And just so you know, I meet with Jackie Law every month. We go over every single special placement. Okay? And I have the names pretty well firm in my head right now. And, we are not, I told you that our special education percentage is high, but for these particular assignments, we are very assertive about our views of best placement that is not immediately into a special program.
Well, then, as long as we're on that page, can you tell us what services and other, and what interfund support are?
Sure. Go ahead.
Well, the interfund support is when we charge the categorical program for overhead cost. So we're basically crediting the general fund, charging the categorical program for administrative overhead oversight of those programs. That's the interfund. So you see the credit in the unrestricted and the debit in the restricted.
Right. And then the services and other, that's above the capital outlay?
That's a big number.
That's all your 5,000 object codes. So
What's in
that-
there?
Huh?
What is in there?
Oh,
5,000,
the
just
five-
in general.
The 5,800,
We don't know what those numbers mean.
Right.
You start off travel and conference, so any kind of travel reimbursement, staff, or a lot of staff development might be going in there, dues and memberships, and then all utilities or facility leases, repairs, rentals, and then you go into the 5,800s, which are the typically other people that we're paying. Sometimes it might be a consultant, might be legal fees, might be if we need to hire a speech and language pathologist that's not actually becoming an employee of ours, but we're contracting with an agency. So the 5,800s often are that group. But
And the
it's,
repair and maintenance piece is probably a big chunk of that. too.
that's, yeah.
and accounting services, all the financial system, internet services, all of that is in the 5,800 object code.
Right.
Software, downloads, support licenses.
I can get you a list here. Was that it? I think I sent it to you. I did send it.
Yeah.
I did.
okay.
That's really helpful to know. I think it's good that we know those things as well.
The biggest line item within the 2 million is operations and housekeeping. I didn't know we did housekeeping. But anyway, it's,
That's your utilities.
I know, keeping your house in order.
Electrical, water, gas, trash.
You get it.
Hank, along those lines, if we wanted to take a deep dive into that, is that stuff online somewhere?
I don't think so. No, I just have to just produce it for you. Yeah.
There is a lot of backup data
There
in
is,
the
but
bigger
yeah,
budget.
but I don't think that, the subcategories of 5,800, I don't think.
Great. Are there any other budget-related questions or comments? No? Well then, maybe it's time for a motion to close the public hearing. There were no speaker cards.
Move that we close the public hearing.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. So we're unanimous on that. I think with the direction to modify, as we
I got
talked
it.
about here,
I understand.
and then we'll look to pass the budget at our next meeting.
Now, just before we back up here. So, just well, number 6, I know. Okay, so I told the board, Chuck, you know this, and Andy knows this, the number 6 is there, is there and was there in case, and Chuck was able to come to me today with a formal statement about CSEA desires for negotiation. They're still working on it. Andy spoke with Chuck's compadre from the state, Mark Love, who's our local union representative, and they're still working on it. So there may be something on June 30th. I don't know. I'm not going to press you, but if there's something on June 30th, I'll put it on the agenda. If there isn't, then Chuck understands that the next option, the next available date is August 18th, right? And if, whatever we all agree on, from salaries back, the business office has done retroactive pay before, and they can do it again, but just so you know, and Chuck knows this, the budget that we'll be working on for the formal adoption on June 30th does include the same numbers for CSEA and administrators as it does for teachers.
And we'll keep you on the agenda until that works out. The door is always open.
And so same thing, I'm sorry, I know we closed it already, but basically we're saying, yes, go ahead as is, and we'll change in August as needed.
As needed. Right. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Unless you change your mind before the big vote.
All right, so that is the end of the public part of the meeting. So we will adjourn to closed session. And just for awareness, the closed session is just to talk about the superintendent evaluation. So we will adjourn until next week.